The British Chief of the General Staff said that there's a distinct possibility we'll be at conflict in the next 3 years. Now, I've been involved in monitoring conflicts and potential for conflicts around the world and our involvement for over 40 years, when I consider when I first joined the army to now what I'm doing and commentating on it. And I've never seen a clearer path to a Third World War. In fact, not just one path, I can see several paths with what's going on in Europe with Ukraine, with the increasing instability in the Middle East, and that's getting worse, not better, and with the aggression that we're seeing with China in Southeast Asia, and that's getting worse, not better. And we're seeing increasing polarization between different groups. So there is a very real potential that we will be involved in a shooting conflict within the next 3 years. And I hope I'm wrong.
Well, he talks about doubling the size of the army by 2027. Is that realistic?
He talks about doubling the effect of the army. That doesn't necessarily mean doubling the size. What he's trying to do is get, in economic terms, more bang for your bucks. So he's trying to get the military capability to be more effective, more lethal, and therefore to be able to take on a stronger enemy force with a weaker numerically military force. That requires sophisticated weapon systems, sophisticated intelligence gathering and targeting systems, the ability to have an effect on the enemy that the enemy can't. Now, we have the technology, we have the experience, we've got the training to do that. We don't have the equipment, we don't have the understanding that's coming out of Ukraine yet. There's a long way to go. And I've heard every other Chief of the General Staff in the British Army say something similar as they've taken over in the last 10 years, and none of them have achieved it. They've all ended up hollowing the army out even more.
There's going to be a defence review soon. So what do you think should be prioritised?
Well, that's part of that's a good thing in one way, and it's a part of the problem in another way. The defence review means that the politicians are going to kick off any decisions into the future. Until they get the output from the defence review, which in some ways is sensible, because you need to know what you need to spend your time, effort and money on in a logical way. In other ways, it's not sensible because the new government have come in and keep saying everything is worse than we'd known and everything else. I'd predicted that that's what they'd say. They've been involved in John Healey, the new Secretary of State, has been involved in defence for over 10 years. He's been fed information from the Defence Select Committee. He knew exactly where the weak points are, and he could make spending decisions today to fill some of those weak points, because it'll take years to turn on the capability, especially in the defence industrial base. So what we need to do very quickly is generate a defence industrial base that can meet the capacity that we expect it to, i.e. provide the amount of ammunition, the missiles, the shells and everything else to meet the sort of expenditure rates that the Ukrainians are seeing. We need to look after our people, because our military can't recruit enough people and it can't retain enough people. Without the people, there's no point in having the fanciest equipment and everything else. And because we need our people more highly trained, be able to operate more equipment, they need to be in longer. It takes a long time to do that. So those are the first two priorities. And they're not sexy, so they're not good for a Secretary of State to stand in front of and take pictures, because it's not a big green or big grey shiny thing. And then we need to start to look at the equipment that we need to fight a conflict. Our army is woefully thinned out. We're only upgrading 148 Challenger 2 to Challenger 3 tanks. We've got no armoured infantry capability to replace the Warrior infantry fighting vehicle. The new Ajax armoured reconnaissance vehicle is hugely overweight, very complex, and is way behind time. The Boxer infantry vehicle is a battlefield taxi. It's brilliant, but we need ones with guns on it and with anti-aircraft capability. And we need to embrace a lot of new technologies. We need to have anti-drone capability. We need to have, and all of this is going to take time. The Navy and the Air Force need their equivalents as well. The Navy's in a better position, but it's short of manpower and short of certain capital ships to deal with wider submarine threats. The Air Force is in a terrible position with lack of pilots and not all the aircraft up to the required standard to fight a modern conflict.
So the Labour government is talking about increasing defence spending to 2.5% of national income. Do you think that's sufficient?
Well, I would hope that if the defence review is allowed to go ahead without any pre-decided caveats that they might even conclude that 3% or 4% is needed to get defence up to the position where we could rein back to 2.5% of GDP. But I think with the soundings that I'm hearing is people are being told that that 2.5% is the upper limit when the conditions are right, and therefore I think that is handcuffing the defence review in a way that means it's not going to give us the answers that we need to the problems that are out there. And what I don't think the Treasury has realised that is, if we spend more on defence, that money isn't wasted. It's spent in British industries. It's employing British people in British jobs. It's paying more taxes. It's increasing the service industries that support those defence industries. It's good for the economy. So, a surge of 3 to 4% for 4 or 5 years may be a good thing.
So finally, how do you assess the public's perception and support for such significant military expansions and this threat that you affirmed? And, they said that we could have a war in 3 years.
Yeah, well, I think the public don't quite understand the realistic threat that there is potentially coming. We're still a way off it. And as I say, I hope I'm wrong. But, again, if our Treasury doesn't understand that spending more money is a good thing for the economy, then the public don't understand that. And therefore, with all of the politics by sound bites that we're getting, and we've had all the time, people will understandably and rightly ask, why is this money not being spent on health, on education, and everything else? You've been telling us that we don't need to spend on defence beforehand. Where's all this panic suddenly coming in from? And I think previous governments have misled the public, and this government, I think, is in danger of doing exactly the same. We need to wake up to the reality, and the more we spend on defence, the less chance there is of a shooting conflict. If we don't spend enough, I think Putin and Xi Jinping and the Grand Ayatollah in Iran see an opportunity. That would be disastrous.
Col Phil Ingram, thank you so much for speaking to us.
Thank you very much indeed.